Committee for April the 3rd. We're going to start by having the reading of the land acknowledgement. And Deputy Mayor Fryer, can you do that today, please?
For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities, the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationships it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you. I'll mention that Councillor Ring has sent his regrets in for this meeting. In terms of the adoption of the agenda, the motion before us is this, that the content of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee agenda for April 3rd, 2023 be adopted as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Baines, Councillor Potts. Would there be any amendments? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Any business arising from the previous meeting? Seeing none, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position, please let me know. We have two deputations this afternoon. The first one is on the Lakehead University program. And would Melanie Oakes be here? No, not Melanie, somebody else. Welcome.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Okay, Melanie's behind me, and thank you for the invitation. Also behind me is my other colleague, Rebecca Heffernan. Both of them work at Lakehead University with me and in the Office of Research. I'm Mike Denhaan, Vice President of External Relations. I work on both the Orillia and the Thunder Bay campus. I live in Simcoe County. I'm up and down quite a bit, and it's a real pleasure for me to give a deputation, an update on Simcoe County's university today. Thank you. All right, so next slide, please. Thank you. This is the right slide. As a first-generation Canadian, I learned the value of a university education from my father, who was fortunate enough to go to university after he immigrated to Canada in the 1950s and graduated from Banting Memorial High School in Alliston, here in Simcoe County. My dad pushed me to go to university as well, and I now work at a university that works hard to ensure that any student from any walk of life can have access to a university education and thrive. Since 2006, our mandate has been to provide learners with access to degree-level education. When the Orillia campus was first established in 2006, the degree attainment rate in Simcoe County was below the provincial and national levels. In 2016, only 18.3% of people aged 25 to 64 in Simcoe County had a bachelor's degree or higher, less than the provincial average of 32%. Since 2016, Lakehead Orillia has seen tremendous growth in its student population. We've seen a 41% increase in university degree enrollment at Lakehead University in the Orillia campus, and 45% of our students come from Simcoe County. Lakehead's committed to helping students overcome barriers to access and offering every student a transformative experience. And this is reflected in the statistics you see on the screen in front of you. 94% of our students have at least one barrier to education, from financial to accessibility requirements, and over 50% of our student population is the first in their family to go to post-secondary. So our smaller campus tends to feel more like home and more familiar. One of our biggest draws is the fact that we are in Simcoe County. Next slide, please. Lakehead works hard to ensure and support students and their success. We also play a significant role in the economic development of the region. The economic impact of the Orillia campus alone is $245 million annually, and that doesn't factor in Lakehead's $3.56 billion impact on Ontario's GDP as a whole on an annual basis. Having a university degree here in Simcoe County generates a number of benefits. It attracts students from other parts of the province to the county, increasing the number of students that will live and stay here. We have over 2,500 Lakehead University alumni living within Simcoe County, and we attract students from other countries, increasing the diversity of the population to the region. Lakehead Aurelia currently has 118 international students coming from 29 countries, a 28% increase in the on-campus population from 2018. And after graduating, these students apply for work permits that allow them to work here for 3 years full-time, and that allows them to apply for permanent residency. We also attract talent to the area. Faculty and staff move to Simcoe County and become residents, contributing as taxpayers, but also as residents, buying local, living local, etc. Over 250 faculty and staff are employed at Lakehead Aurelia, including myself. In our partnership with Georgian College, we've introduced new STEM programming, including highly sought-after programs in computer science and electrical engineering, with a new engineering program set to launch this fall. Next slide. Having Lakehead here in Simcoe County means that students can stay in their home community to study, which makes them more likely to stay once they've completed their degree. Out of the 2,100 students enrolled at the Aurelia campus and Lakehead Georgian, 950 of them come from across Simcoe County and 19 from the town of Collingwood. Alumni like Sarah McCullough, who completed both her undergraduate and graduate degrees with Lakehead University, is one of them. And I'd show you a video of Sarah. It's on there now, but I understand it's not working. So I'll just quickly say a moment. I'd love to share it with you, and we'll send it to you afterwards because I think you'll really love the video. But Sarah grew up in the Collingwood area. She is now an OPP communications operator. She runs a 911 dispatch for the region. She's been there for 6 years. She's a first-generation university graduate. She has 2 degrees from Lakehead, an undergraduate and a graduate degree. She came into Lakehead wanting to do education as a teacher and happened to take criminology because that's part of the curriculum at Lakehead. It's a very well-rounded curriculum. She loved it so much that she decided to do a degree in criminology and then post-grad work, and now she works for the OPP. Very articulate. You'll love her video when we send it to you, so stay tuned. And it's also about increasing access to new talent. So when asked how many of our students find work after graduation, we can proudly say that 97% of our graduates from the Aurelia campus find work within their field of study within 2 years. That's been consistently above the provincial average for many years. Lakehead also connects local employers with talented students and graduates seeking part-time, full-time, and cooperative positions. Next slide. While Lakehead University is a relatively small university, we are consistently one of the leaders in terms of research productivity and impact. Since 2006, Aurelia faculty researchers have been awarded more than $6.3 million in research funding. And these are in areas like cybersecurity, the arts, environment. Dr. D'Oliveira, for example, an assistant professor in the computer science department, is working on industry-leading research that could give robots touch sensing capabilities. His team is investigating interfaces that integrate tactile perception to state-of-the-art computer vision systems so that robots can feel the features of the objects they touch, for example, the shape, texture, temperature. The results of this research will provide solutions for practical problems in the health and the industrial sectors. Next slide. In addition to industry partnerships for collaboration to conduct research, Lakehead also provides access to resources for industry and education opportunities. As you can all imagine, education must evolve to continue meeting the needs of our region. Lakehead continues to work hard on this, at both the high school level and with people who are retired as part of our lifelong continuing learning. Working with the high school students in the specialist high skills major, we have offered the Ontario Youth Naturalist Certificate Program in high schools across the county. Through the Office of Community Engagement and Lifelong Learning, our team facilitated lectures, workshops in the last year for over 750 learners in the 50-plus category. We're also partnering with local businesses to create micro-programming, such as equity, diversity, and inclusion training to support the upskilling of our current workforce. And for example, we're working with the City of Orillia to train all of their employees in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Next, and it might be the almost last slide. So what is next for Lakehead? You can be proud that Lakehead is the highest ranked university in the world with under 10,000 students in the Times Higher Ed Impact Rankings. The Orillia campus now has over 2,000 students, and we're out of space. We're also looking into the future and remain committed to serving the county. This means we aim to grow our student body from 2,000 to 3,500 students, and we'll add 10 new programs in the coming years, programs that we plan to align with the future needs of the region. Our future is growth and service. Last slide. So thank you for this opportunity to give you an update on Lakehead, Simcoe County's university. And I'd like to invite you and the entire council, in fact, for a campus tour at any time. We'd love to have you and host you on campus. And through the chair, I'd be happy to respond to any questions the committee might have for me.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Would anyone like to ask a question of Mr. Don today? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned that some of your programs are offered in collaboration with Georgian College, and then you mentioned a little later that you are out of space. And I'm wondering, has there been any consideration of the notion of partnering or collaborating or appearing in some way at the Georgian College campus in Collingwood?
Collingwood. Not that I'm aware of. It's a really interesting idea, and we have programs throughout the county. I think we've got some programs in partnership through our research department in Collingwood, but we can certainly add that to our list of topics to think about and talk about as well. So we have space on our current campus in Orillia as well, so we're looking at both physical expansion and program expansion across the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. A question for you. Are there any bursaries currently now for Simcoe County students, and more particularly, are there any bursaries for your students who are from Collingwood?
I'm going to look at my colleagues here a minute to see if there might be. Looks like there are. In fact, Melanie used to work in student services. I know there's also a new Simcoe County. They've expanded the Simcoe County bursary program through the county. There was you'll be interested in this, there was a press release last week about that. And that bursary program is for students from Simcoe County who want to attend a Canadian university and especially anywhere local. And that's worth promoting to kids in Collingwood and the region here too as well.
Thank you. I'm involved with a service club that focuses on youth 18 years of age and under, but nevertheless, I'm always interested to know if ours or other service clubs could be of assistance in this regard.
I think you probably could. It'd be wonderful to connect after or offline on that. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say Councillor Doherty was reading my mind because, and in fact, at the end of the week, I was looking up on the website Lakehead Georgian College because we're in the process of setting up an economic development committee with our business community. And I am committed to finding out what their needs are. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be, why don't we train up some people here for what we need for our industry, our tourism sector, our engineering companies. They're always, short of engineers, and they even advertise on the taxi cabs in town, hoping there might be one driving through Collingwood looking for a job. So I will be reaching out to your university, because I have some thoughts I'd like to explore as the months unfold here. So thank you very much for coming by, and we'll be in touch.
That sounds great. In fact, my colleague behind me, Rebecca, is doing some work here already. We'd love to follow up. So
Okay, that'd be great. Rebecca, reach out to me. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
The next deputation is on the Collingwood Pride Festival. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hamlin, councillors, and staff. I recognize quite a few people here today. Nice to be here. Thank you very much for having us. So in case you don't know who I am, I'm Dr. John Miller. I'm a dentist in town. I'm the chair of the Rainbow Club of South Georgian Bay, as well as the chair of the Pride Festival. And I'm also a past member of the BIA in town, and I think a connector of people in the town. And so obviously we're here to talk about this year's Pride Festival.
Thanks. Very nice to meet you all. Some of you I know already. My name is Michelle Kemper. I am the vice chair of the Rainbow Club of South Georgian Bay, local resident, have a 13-year-old son who loves playing hockey here in town and goes to Mountain View, and we've really thrived living in this community. We want to tell you a little bit about the Rainbow Club. So starting with this slide, as you can see, our vision during the year is to have a mission to promote equality and celebrate diversity in our region. If we could go to the next slide. We also have values that include celebrating respect, equality, and diversity in our community. We're a registered nonprofit. We've been active as a registered nonprofit since 2020, and we're a small but dedicated group of volunteers at this point. We believe that our values align quite nicely with the town's values. You talk on your website, and I think live the values of vision of building an inclusive, equitable, and accessible community where everyone feels valued, respected, and has a sense of belonging here.
Why are we here? I think you know why we're here. Mainly, we want to create awareness for the Pride Festival. We have a history, so people know about it. But really, we're here for your help from a promotional, a financial, and an in-kind perspective. For those that don't know, I'll give you a little bit of history of where we've come to from today. Our initial planning started in 2020, and obviously the world caved in on that year, but a lot of the groundwork got started then. That led us to 2021, which was still our pandemic year, and we had a virtual event, which was quite a feat to manage to do that. We actually had 1,500 attendees. It was one of the largest online presences in terms of festivals of that year. And then last year in 2022, we had our first in-person event. And I hope that some of you were here to experience it. I did want to mention that we have circulated some videos that I think really capture the energy and what happened. It was an experience. So I hope that you will watch those videos to kind of capture what happened. So the big thrust last year was that we had a community parade, and I think that it was something for everyone to be proud of. If we go to slide 4. So we were, there we are. Yep. We were named the 2022 Newsmaker of the Year, which we're very proud of. Next slide. A very important part of what we have done leading up to Pride last year, what we will be doing is sensitivity training. We'll be doing that with a number of businesses, and anyone who we work with Pride needs to be ensured that they have been sensitivity trained, so that we know that the message we're delivering is one that we agree with. We also helped, if you go to slide 7, in the past we helped with the funding of the Rainbow Crosswalk. And as I said before, we hosted a very fun, well-attended, positive parade. So if we look over the years, the success, we've been growing. We do have metrics that show from a social media perspective and in-person attendance that this is a growing festival. So we believe it brings many positives to this town, including a positive, diverse celebration to the town, tourism, which includes people and dollars, supporting all of our local businesses. It affirms the town's commitment to diversity. And I have to say, personally, being at the last float, coming down the main street and turning around to see the impact, it was quite powerful. So, on to slide 9.
As John just said, it was incredibly powerful for us to be in the parade and to turn around and see the entire community, all kind of walks of life, families, business owners, people from every walk of life in Collingwood there supporting us and kind of coming in behind the parade and celebrating. And it was a really amazing experience for all of us. So we want to tell you a bit about our plan for 2023. So we are planning another in-person event for this year. That will include a parade, include community events, and include a main stage festival that we'd be holding in the parking lot behind Eddie Bush. We've kind of increased the scope of the event quite a bit and taken on a few more responsibilities onto the Rainbow Club and its volunteers. For instance, the parade last year was run by the BIA, and they have given us funding, and we're going to be doing it ourselves this year. We've also added a big community festival with the main stage, with an outdoor beer garden, and of course, with all of that comes added budget and expenses. We want to tell you a little bit about where we stand financially to date. We have been working with the Parks and Recs folks, and we've been meeting with them since September. They did approve a $5,000 grant for us, and so we're very appreciative of that and really appreciate that. If we could move on to the slide 10. So just to give you a sense of some of the community support that we have, we already have sponsors from all over the region, all over Collingwood, the different aspects of our business here. So local businesses, real estate agencies, media agencies, members of the BIA. And if we could just go through the next few slides. So some social agencies, slide, including the BIA also. And finally, onto the next slide, we have a sponsorship from the TD Bank, and they've been a very significant sponsor last year and again this year. In addition to this, we've also done, we hired someone to do grant writing for us. So we've done a significant amount of grant writing out there. And we still have about $135,000 that we're trying to raise to put on this 4-day festival. So we wanted to also just mention that we have been coordinating with town staff, and we started meeting with Parks and Recs folks back in September. They have been very supportive. They've been super helpful. We talked to them in March about the fact that we were going to come to council and make this request directly. And so we've kind of given them a heads up about that. And again, thank them very much for what they've done so far to help us kind of guide the process and make sure that we're communicating with the town about our plans so that we have as much success as possible.
So, what we're here for today is to ask for your help financially. We're looking to make the town of Collingwood a title sponsor, which means it's a $25,000 level. We've already been granted a $5,000 grant. We would like $10,000 of in-kind support, along with a $10,000 financial contribution. With the $10,000 in-kind, basically that's covering waiving the cost of the parking lot for the weekend is a big one, as well as the various permit application fees for our special event permit, parade permit, and other fees, help with garbage removal, water supply, and other municipal services. So why do we feel that council should support this festival? We've kind of gone over it, but just again, it's supporting diversity and inclusion, part of the mandate for town of Collingwood. the dollars that come to this town from the festival. And I want to just point out that this momentum that we've created, it's like this rock rolling down a hill, and we don't want to stop it. So as people who know me, I have big visions. I'm very ambitious, and I'm hoping that this festival grows to be the signature event for Collingwood. We do have the volunteers. I'm pretty. I like to reach out to people and ask for help. So we have a lot of people that are willing to help, and I think that was one of the reasons that the BIA decided that we should take on the parade ourselves this year, because I do know from my experience with the BIA that there's limited volunteers, and I think that we can make this event amazing. It would be wonderful to talk to council about having a multi-year commitment, so that next year when we start the planning, we're not starting from zero again. So I'd love for you to take that into consideration. And I guess, what does it mean for you to be a title sponsor? So essentially, the town would be recognized as the presenting sponsor on all media releases, on a sponsor booth. In our app, we're doing an app for the weekend, so it would be all over our app that everyone would register on. On-site signage, and be given many on-stage mentions throughout the festival, as well on social media. So I guess in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. We have been working with the town. We look forward to working with you guys, with you people, in the future. And we thank you very much for your consideration. So thank you. And if you have any questions, please shoot.
Okay, thank you. That was energetic and interesting as usual. Thank you. Who would have some questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Perry.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Hi, John. How are you? So the attendance last year, do you have any figures on that?
Yeah, we think there was about 5,000 people that were in attendance for the parade last year.
Okay, fair enough. And what do you see the festival becoming? I'm looking 4 or 5 years down the road. I've kind of got an idea in my mind. I just want to know what you guys are.
I mean, it made a lot of sense this year to have it in a parking lot, because we want everything to be contained within one site where there's a beer garden where everyone, and it's accessible to everybody. So this is an all ages family. So if I had to say, where do we see this going? I would say bigger. The one thing we didn't really mention was the community involvement is, aside from the festival itself, I've been reaching out to many different groups within the region to do things aside from the festival. We've got a yoga session. We've got a pride run that we're doing on Saturday. And, now what's happening is people are coming to us and saying, we want to be part of the festival. So, I see it only growing. The problem is, where do we take it? Because as the numbers swell, obviously the parking lot's going to be restricting with the size. We did talk about Simcoe Street. There are some issues there in terms of, like keeping it contained so that everyone is visualizing the same thing. But I think it's open to discussion, and it's really a matter of how big does it get. The one thing that's new this year is that I'm planning to attend the Toronto Pride Festival with a booth. I still have to confirm, but what that's meaning is that we've really tried to kind of make this a community event, but I think we've passed that point now. So I think that it's going Toronto, and people are hearing about it, and now I think we'll actually start advertising. But we just have to be careful, to do that, because we need the resources, we need the people, and we don't want to get ourselves too far ahead. But I see ourselves, this growing to a massive festival.
And just to add to that, I think part of the strength of what we've done so far is trying to make sure that because we have a diverse community, making sure we have different types of events. So the run in the morning is for people that's their thing. The outdoor yoga, there's something for folks that want to do that. There's a boat cruise for people that want to go and be on the water. There's a main stage festival for people that want to dance and have fun, but that, we potentially have events at the library library where, parents of kids that want to be there and do something like that can be there, that we have speaker series for people that are interested in the more educational aspects. And so making sure that those are covered. And then, just speaking for myself, I see what's happening at the pier, and there's some interesting ideas there around space that could be used in the future to host these kind of, very lively festivals. I see us being able to partner on those kinds of things in the future as well. And we're always trying to strike that balance of wanting to make sure that we do something that the local residents really embrace and feels good for the community, but that also brings that tourism dollar in. So, trying to strike that balance.
Right. Just one more. I know this is fairly new, but do you have any data on as far as hotel stays or anything like that, or people actually staying in town or possibly staying at the mountain? I know it's early and you may not, but
We have been trying to track as much as we can, and what we do have tracked is some of the social media engagement, and so we have a better sense of that. And this year, one of our intentions with bringing this app on board is that the app will give us that sense of how many people are checking it, how many people are attending, how many people are actually here, and it'll give us more of those metrics so that we can actually measure community impact, tourism impact.
right.
We'll also be, we're working on things like after parties and that kind of thing, which will be ticketed events, which will be packaged with stays as well. So that once we kind of do that, then that's an easy way to get metrics on that.
Nice. Oh, no, this is super exciting, and I think it's great for not only the community but for the town itself and what you're presenting. It's I'm pretty stoked about it. So no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Through you, I'm in support of supporting this. I'm not sure I'm in support of the total quantum. And I should say, last year I walked in the parade along with my daughter, who's gay. I hope that doesn't disqualify me from voting in this. But so I, to your point about a longer term commitment, I'd certainly support that, but perhaps for a lesser total. And in regard to the quantum, as I understand it, that was 5 from Parks and Rec, 10 of fees that would be waived, and then 10 cash contribution. Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And all the best to you. And I look forward to participating this year as well. Thank you.
And I think the comment we're making about future year commitment is we just want to make sure that we're not, that we are involved in the budget process and that we're, involving ourselves in whatever process it needs to be so that we're not like coming to you at the last minute, but instead that we're being integrated into whatever processes work for you folks to make sure that, that you're getting the information you need from us as early as possible.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and thank you to the presenters. I think we're all really excited about the potential of this for the town, and I think the economic spinoff is clearly there. And don't get nervous from this question, but I ask this every time someone asks for money. So where in the budget is it? Do we have room in the budget, and is the treasurer available to us? Kind of there, I see.
Hello, Treasurer Quinlan. Go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Jeffrey. So we do have our council grants budget amount, which is about $80,000 for the 2023 year. We haven't specifically tied that to any one grant. It's maintaining the support level we've done in the past. And to date, we've only spent about or allocated about $20,000 of it. So there is a remaining amount of about $60,000 available there.
Okay, thank you. So money check. So also the impact of the in-kind in terms of our budget, it also gets accounted for probably through the council grant on one side and revenue on the other somewhere else. I'm assuming there's a paper somehow. Just to be clear on the impact that we have in-kind on our budget.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Jeffrey. In the past, for items like this, we haven't recorded the in-kind side. So for example, I'm just going to use the parking lot amount that the group has requested. We don't generally record it as a loss in revenue, but we do have a paper trail in terms of the resolution and then what comes through from PRC in terms of management as well.
So I too would support it and would just ask when it's appropriate. Sometimes we do motions from the deputation, sometimes other business, but I'd be willing to move the amount that's presented here. I also agree with it going into the budget process early so that we can be dealing with things. Also add that to my motion, that it become part of the budget presentation to council annually. And the other question I have might be for Director Slama, but I noticed today when I went over for the fly grazing event for Dig Safe that the sidewalk is starting to have some wear and tear on the edges. And I'm just wondering before the event in July that maintenance would be updated and it would be looking nice for the event. All parts of my motion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hamlin, and I'm certainly supportive as well. I listened to Councillor Perry ask you the questions about metrics and things like that, and I recall back, and I only mentioned the Elvis Festival because I was in the early stages, heavily involved in the planning of that, and I remember getting into those areas of trying to determine those metrics that everybody's going to be wanting to know. But I congratulate you on your success to date. Just from my own outside observation, I see the potential of this to be something phenomenal too. And so you mentioned, I believe that you were $135,000 still short. What's your total anticipated budget for the event?
300,000.
300. And
That includes lots of in-kind.
Lots of in-kind.
Lots of, the local hotels helping with rooms and lots of goodwill that's out there.
There's still a lot out that we're hearing from very soon. And we've applied for over $300,000 in grants, of which only, I think, 80,000 applies actually to the Pride Festival. The rest would apply to the Rainbow Club as an organization. So
To do some strategic planning, some community capacity building, some needs assessments.
yeah. That's always the scary part about the success is the growing cost that you can see there, but you've got the coverage coming in. So again, I wish you the best of success with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to also reiterate my support and attending it last year. The energy was incredible. So I'd hats off to you all and best of luck in the future with it.
thank you.
Thanks for being there.
Thank you. So I have a question for Director Culver. You are probably the most knowledgeable about what other big events we might be asked to fund this year. I know one group has approached me about a big event the weekend before this, but that's all that I'm aware of. And I'm just wondering whether you're anticipating other asks for community events and whether we need to have a holistic approach to this or whether it's okay to do one-offs as they come forward, in your view. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. So the first part of the answer to your question, so the only avenue that we have as staff to support community events is through the CRCG, the Community Recreation and Culture Grant. So that's a $50,000 allocation by council that's a delegated authority to PRC to provide a program of support. And actually, Manager Cubitt will be reporting on that a little bit later in this meeting in terms of the outcomes for 2023. And John's already alluded to their success in that program. We also, I would say, the PRC Master Plan of 2019 actually identified a need to begin understanding a new framework for how events are supported. And so we've been intending to do this work. COVID kind of got in the way a little bit. We're actually in a master plan refresh process right now. So we do think it's a good idea because opportunities like the Pride Festival is bringing to the community, I think, deserve a different lens than some others. And I will say, just in closing on this answer, that we're quite confident working with Pride in this, and thinking that there is a lot of reasons to provide this support. It's an exceptionally strong organizing committee, one of the most organized I've seen. And their the will and expertise they have behind it, I know will make it a success for the community. So it's a very low risk from the standpoint of supporting.
Okay, thank you. That's I'm so glad you're looking at it in the context of a refresh too, because as this festival, I know there's others as we're growing and people get exciting ideas about how to engage with us all. Okay, that's great. Why don't you bring your motion now? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So I would move that council support the financial request in kind and cash with respect to this. I would also ask that we refer it to the budget annually in terms of the planning process and requirements that we can consider on an annual basis for it. And that we ask that the Rainbow Sidewalk be updated or maintained time for the event.
Want to put our best foot forward. This is my new phrase. Who would like to second this? Councillor Potts. Thank you.
And I think in terms of the planning times, I'd ask for council to waive notice with respect. I'll move that.
Okay, so a seconder on the waiving of notice. Deputy Mayor Fryer, thank you. We'll vote on that first. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. We have a seconder in Councillor Potts for Councillor Jeffrey's motion. And any further comment or questions?
Still has to go to council and.
Oh, this. Yeah. Oh, so you were waiving notice? I thought of going to council.
For us to get it to council quicker. We don't have to wait.
Quicker, so it can come next week. Is that what you're thinking? 17th. Okay, that's great. Okay, all in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're very excited to be working with you.
We have 3 staff reports today. The first one is with respect to the interim report on our Arts Feasibility Center. And who would be leading that discussion today? Director Culver, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So I believe, and I'm just going to double check that our attendees are online. Okay. Yeah, we're all set with 4. Okay, yeah. So this is actually an exciting presentation. I'm going to refer back to the 2019 PRC Master Plan that identified that we should review feasibility and sustainability of a multifunctional arts and culture center for Collingwood. And at the point when the master plan was presented to council, staff had identified a concurrent approach to an arts center feasibility combined with a multi-use recreation center feasibility. For the 2020 budget, interested community stakeholders and parties presented a strong desire to see a separated facility analyzed through a separate approach. And council supported this with a $50,000 budget allocation to complete what became phase 1 of the study. The RFP for contracted services was developed and issued in 2020. However, the COVID period resulted in a delay of the project kickoff until February of 2021. But with the initiation of their contract, Nordicity has provided outstanding work, expedited very quickly relative to the complexity of this program. And JIMO, their partner in the contract, have a somewhat smaller role in phase 1. However, their role in phase 2, initiated in July of 2022, includes a great deal more of their expertise in analysis and assessment of the 6 potential sites that were initially indicated in phase 1. So from our consultation team, please let me introduce, and I'm not sure if they'll show up or not, but I'm 99% Stephanie Ma from JIMO will be presenting. And I think there's Natalia. There's Natalia Linka's there. And Peter Lyman should be coming on, I would imagine. I'm sorry, my eyes aren't good enough to see. Oh, Caitlin's on as well. So from Nordicity. There's Peter. Okay, great. So I'll hand the presentation over to Jaimo and Nordicity, and I'll return at the end with a recommendation.
Thank you. Who would like to start this afternoon?
Madam Mayor, it'll be myself, Peter, and my colleagues will also speak too. Thank you for the opportunity, and this is our second time presenting to you. This is for phase 2. Dean sort of went over the sequence of events that led to this. We can see the next slide, but I'll give you a bit more background at this point. The phase 1 ended up with a conclusion that the town was for an arts center. It was widely supported, and the project was feasible. However, there were 2 schools of thought as to the right size. One of something like a 400 to 600 seat theater, and one with 800 plus. Well, we modeled the 2 of them in a report, and we looked at the pros and cons, but we did not make a recommendation. Another factor was the sites, and 6 sites were identified, but we were not commissioned to select one. But we did say that there were definitely sites that were available. A final part was for the programming of the community programming part of the arts, we articulated a vision for the visual arts, but it was a little vague, we must admit, so that it found itself into the scope for phase 2. Phase 2 objectives, which we're reporting on today, which the report came out, as you know, were to validate the findings of phase 1 and then reconsider, look at the size, make recommendations for the size, programming scope, and indeed the location. So as Dina said, Nordicity looked at size and scope, and Jaimo, the site selection. So next 2 slides, I think. So scope, yes, all right. So I'll just give you a sense of the approach we took in the size question, and in particular, and Caitlin will later tell you about the results of it. But we just want to make sure that you understand that we did a fair amount of effort from different angles, including looking at a wide number of Southern Ontario art centers, both medium and slightly larger cities. So we had a pretty good range. We wanted to compare the operating plans and financial statements. We also, because of construction costs have gone up since we first reported, we recalibrated the construction costs and made new estimates. We looked at the visitor potential for art center events, like how many people would come into Collingwood, and work with the city on its own studies in that regard. And most particularly, we took a refined look at the disposable income within the market, both Collingwood and visitors, as to whether the market size, how sufficient it was for each of the 2 alternatives. We consulted again with the community members, the arts groups, a wide number of them, which we had consulted in phase 1, but this time we could bring to them concrete plans, got their sense of what they would do with it. As I said, we talked to Collingwood staff, and we did have interviews with about a half a dozen art centers across Southern Ontario. So all in all, it was a pretty wide analysis of different angles, looking at community needs, risk assessment for the projections that we used for phase 1 that resulted in the market forecasts. So with all that analysis, we think we have a solid recommendation of market sizing and also a validation of the needs. Caitlin, you take over.
Thank you. We can move on to the next slide. So as Peter explained, part of our research process was comparative study, and we looked at 10 art centers across the province, half of them over 700 seats and half of them under 700 seats. And we chose these centers based on various stakeholder recommendations. And the general finding was that municipalities more comparable to Collingwood in terms of its size tend to develop the smaller art centers. Facilities that seat more than 700 patrons, on the other hand, tend to serve cities with a population of at least 130,000. We also found that municipal subsidy provided for the smaller centers was much larger than what was projected to be the subsidy for a Collingwood facility. The average subsidy was found to be 465,000 annually versus Collingwood's 250,000. The market in Collingwood is relatively small, with a population hovering around 25,000, but there is a projected increase to 42,000 by 2051. In addition, median incomes in Collingwood are higher than comparably sized towns, and Collingwood welcomes a large number of annual visitors. And when combined, all of these factors do reduce the risks usually associated with small market sizes. However, despite the advantages, analysis of the market size in terms of local disposable income and the average proportion of income spent on live performing arts annually indicates that a medium-sized facility can feasibly meet usage projections now and can into the future. While on the other hand, there is high risk of not being able to meet usage projections in a large facility, both now and in the future, even with the projected population increase. Next slide, please. Construction costs have increased year over year since 2021 and will feasibly continue to do so into the future. The large facility will cost approximately double the small medium facility would. Large is estimated to cost between about 50 million and 67.5 million, while the small medium is estimated to cost approximately 25 million to 34 million. The construction cost estimates don't include soft costs such as architectural fees, and they only account for the building itself. Those figures don't account for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, which can feasibly add another 10% to the cost. And they also don't include any external construction, like a parking structure, for example. We looked at the economic impact that both size options would have locally, and assuming both are running successfully and at full capacity and are attracting the out-of-town ticket buyers needed to support operations. And perhaps unsurprisingly, it was found that the larger facility would likely have a larger economic impact than a small medium facility. We used the Tourism Regional Economic Impact Model and found that the larger facility would bring in about $3.3 million in annual visitor spending and create 26 jobs. And the small medium facility would bring in about $1 million in annual visitor spending and create about 8 jobs. We balanced this finding with our understanding of the town's priorities based on conversations with economic development and other town stakeholders. What we heard was that the town's priority is not to increase the number of tourists and visitors, but rather to attract new permanent residents to the area, those who will invest locally, those who will work from Collingwood, as opposed to increasing the number of tourists. And related to this, the priority is to increase the amount of money that visitors spend, not the number of visitors. The reason being that the downtown already experiences some congestion and crowding, and so moving the focus away from bringing in additional influxes of people is a way to prevent overcrowding and overcongestion, especially as the town's population increases. And so now I will turn it over to my colleague, Natalia.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. And we can go to the next slide. Great. Thank you. So as Peter mentioned earlier, through the consultations in this phase, we were able to check back in with some of the local artists and community members that we'd connected with in phase 1 to validate that the information presented in the phase 1 report and narrow in on their preferences from the options provided. And through these discussions, we confirmed that Collingwood is home to a very vibrant arts community consisting of mainly small to micro-sized theater, dance and performing arts companies, musicians and recording artists, digital media entrepreneurs, and a number of visual artists that have set up a home along what's colloquially known as Creative Simcoe Street. The arts sector currently feels constrained by a lack of adequate, affordable, and accessible creative spaces, and they're looking for a destination to call home. We heard that the arts sector wants this new facility to be built by and for the community, so the lobby space should be open to the public on a regular basis. As a result, we recommend that the lobby contain seating and be attached to a cafe or a restaurant of some kind to encourage people to come in and stay for a while. As well, the public spaces of the facility should be designed with art exhibition as a function in mind so that the center can continuously promote and showcase the Collingwood visual arts. The community believes that the center will help cement Collingwood's destination status no matter what size is pursued, but still, we learned that the majority of local performing arts companies feel that they would have to scale their activities substantially to be able to fill an 800+ seat performing arts space. So overall, the preference leaned towards having a smaller, purpose-built main theater in the around 400 to 500 seat range. There still is interest in developing a smaller, more flexible black box facility as well within this space. And these consultations confirmed that rehearsal and education spaces will be needed to facilitate traditional and media-based arts programming. Next slide, please. Thank you. Great. So with all of this research in mind, we plotted out how well each size of facility would meet the needs of interested stakeholders in Collingwood and the capacity and the resources of the town. And from the perspective of identified risk and overall feasibility, Nerdicity recommends pursuing option 1, which we've retermed medium facility, as that's a bit more of an accurate descriptor. A medium scale facility better aligns with community needs and desires, is more consistent with art centers developed in municipalities of similar scale, and is likely to cost the town less, both in construction and operation. The evidence shows that small-sized facilities can also be economic generators and great places for communities to connect, enjoy, and participate in arts and culture. The evidence also shows that there's sizable risk of not being able to reach the operating and usage projections for the larger facility, and that Collingwood and the region's population alone, fast growing as it is unlikely to bring in enough activity to make those projections attainable for the option number 2. Next slide, please. Thank you. So with that in mind, and in collaboration with our partners at JIMO Architects, we provided an updated space programming and size estimate for the facility. The primary changes from what was put forward in phase 1 are the addition of a secondary performance space there, of more flexible nature, as well as the addition of catering and office spaces and retail and market spaces into the must-have category to ensure that the facility is usable for many purposes to all who may need it. So all in all, we estimate that this facility would be between 43,000 and 48,000 square feet. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague Stephanie Ma at JIMO to take us through the location pieces.
Thanks, Natalia. Next slide, please. So once we had the programming and square footage determined, we could build on this to recommend a location. Next slide, please. So JIMO developed an evaluation framework to identify the information needed to further narrow down the 6 shortlisted sites identified in phase 1. Those sites are shown in this map here. It's the Eddie Bush Arena, the Leisure Time Club, the Grain Terminal site on the waterfront spit, and 3 downtown parking lots. So the criteria is listed here, and I'll explain each in a bit more detail. For the sake of time, I won't go over the findings for every site, but you can find that in the report, and I'll go over some highlights. So for current use and availability for development, this includes asking, is the site available for new construction or redevelopment in the next 3 to 7 years, particularly from a current use and programming perspective. In this one, the 2 major findings were that the Eddie Bush Arena was not available. It would cause the displacement of the current recreational activities that happen there, and those can be easily offered elsewhere. The other major finding was that the Grain Terminal site actually was a possibility for consideration through the study. Throughout the process, we had multiple discussions with Streetcar, the developer of the grain terminals, and found that they were open to the possibility of integrating. The next item is infrastructure and engineering requirements. So this is based on discussions with the town's engineering department to understand the civil infrastructure and servicing impacts of each site. Here we found that the Leisure Time Club was not possible due to major transmission water main and major trunk storm culverts that traverse through the site, which were not possible to move. Next is site access, which looks at how accessible is the site via car, transit, and active transportation, so things like biking or walking. It was determined that due to the scale of this facility, even at the medium size, site access is certainly a challenge for all sites, especially when the facility is at full capacity. but this isn't seen as a sufficient enough problem to prevent the project from moving forward. Finally, we're left with destination and context. So this looks at, is the site well suited to meet the community vision of an arts center that acts as a local landmark and destination? And how well does it integrate into the surrounding context? So from here, we found that 48 St. Marie Street, which is the parking lot just across from the Creative Simcoe Street area, was the most suitable context out of the 3 downtown parking lots. So as such, out of those 3, that site is recommended for further study. And also that the grain terminal is also found suitable and recommended based on not its current context, but the future context of the redevelopment plans that were shared by Streetcar on March 27th. So next slide, please. This leads us to site recommendations. So at this stage of the process, we did a massing study of the Arts Center on both of these 2 locations, 48 St. Marie Street and the grain terminals, essentially modeling a very conceptual design that meets the square footage and programming requirements. And this isn't meant to be a final design by any means. It's more of a proof of concept process just to ensure that an art center of this size and scale could fit into the site and give us something more tangible to assess in terms of opportunities and challenges. So the similarities between the 2 are that they both meet the same programming and square footage requirements, and they both have a very preliminary construction cost estimate of 25 to 34 million. Beyond that, though, they offer very different contexts and construction approaches, so I'll go over those now. Next slide, please. So the first site, 48 St. Marie Street, you can see it here on the bottom left. That's currently what the parking lot looks like. And if developed, it would essentially extend the adjacent Creative Simcoe Street and integrate into the existing vibrant community, offering expanded opportunities for downtown Collingwood. Next slide, please. So this drawing on this slide shows a potential massing of a new 45,000 square foot art center constructed on a 35,000 square foot parking lot in downtown Collingwood. So that results in about a 2-level, 3-story building. And it includes some small outdoor components as well, such as an urban plaza along St. Marie Street. The images on the right are precedent examples, just showing ideas of what this could look like. In the report for both sites, we list out the opportunities and challenges of each, so I'll go over those briefly now. The opportunity for this site is that we see this as a really exciting chance to add to the already vibrant downtown Collingwood. An art center here would be close to many wonderful amenities, local shops and businesses. It would become an extension of the arts district. It's very walkable and serviced by transit. And so it's really an opportunity to densify downtown and contribute to sustainable growth. Finally, this site also does offer some flexibility in that it's pretty easily interchangeable with the other 2 parking lots that we did assess throughout the study. So if for some reason this parking lot became not available, the project can easily carry on by looking at one of the other parking lots. The challenges of this site mostly include that the site is currently used for parking, so developing it would take away from parking in downtown Collingwood. Also, parking wouldn't fit on the surface of this site, so either a new underground parking garage or a surface parking garage elsewhere downtown would likely need to be built. And then this has a potential for significant added costs. A new parking garage of this size of about 200 spots is estimated at around 10 million. Choosing this site could also have potential delays since a downtown visioning and master plan is being considered by the town. It's possible that the completion of the study may be required before committing to such a large new development. And finally, developing this site would result in an expended town asset that could be used for other benefits. So to be transparent, as part of the study, we did not do a highest and best use analysis for the parking lot. We just confirmed that an arts center could go here. Next slide, please. So the second recommended site is the grain terminal redevelopment. These are renderings from the presentation that was shared by Streetcar on March 27th. So I won't go over the details of it, but it's essentially a landmark transformation on the waterfront and will include new swimming and adventure zone, improved roads and trails, restaurant, hotel, residential, and a significantly improved public realm. Next slide, please. So this slide here is again the massing study for the site. The drawing shows what a new 45,000 square foot art center integrated within the grain terminal development could look like, shown in yellow here. So the entrance to the art center is shown here on the south side facing the town. And then there would be 2 levels located within the existing silos building. And that would extend into another 2-level new construction addition built on the north side of the grain terminal. And that would then extend further into Millennium Park with a new large outdoor amphitheater, which is shown here in green. And again, precedence to the right. So the opportunity here is also very exciting, but for different reasons. An art center integrated here would bring public programming into this local and regional landmark. It would align with the Collingwood Waterfront Master Plan as an opportunity to build an iconic waterfront cultural destination, and one with a unique opportunity for a large outdoor component. And also, since the spit is so large, there is opportunity for ample parking throughout the site. And there's also potential for capital expenditure savings. This would, of course, need to be discussed further. But if we're integrating into existing plans, there could be things like shared infrastructure. The challenge of the site is that the art center would be subsidiary to a larger redevelopment. Since it's not a standalone facility, the vision would be influenced by larger redevelopment, and it's also disconnected from the downtown fabric and community, and thus pretty car dependent. Finally, it would require additional coordination and more assessment to understand how integration into the redevelopment could work. And this would mean a tighter timeline for the town in terms of the planning process, because this plan, the redevelopment plan, is already moving ahead. Next slide, please. So the intention of this comparative analysis was that one site would come out as more suitable and then be recommended. However, we found that both sites are very suitable and have a really exciting potential to meet the desired vision of a new art center. But they also have very different contexts in both the surrounding environment and community, as well as the process for the next phases in terms of collaboration and planning. And so these cannot be compared through a standardized lens. So from an objective perspective, as consultants, we didn't find that one was more feasible than the other. As such, we're recommending that the next step is sharing these 2 recommended sites be publicly shared, and there be input gathered from community members in the town to determine which approach is preferred. Next slide, please. I think our last one. Yeah, so that is an overview of our findings. It is a very long 80-page report. So hopefully that gives you the highlights, and we're happy to answer any questions now. Thank you.
Out it so clearly for us. So at this stage, over to Director Culver.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So what we'd like to do at this point, obviously that's a huge amount of information to digest quickly. However, I think the sum of it is that we have 2 very viable options, each with their own unique characteristics, which would be iconic in their own right or impactful in their own right. There's a little bit of extra work to be done, including a desire to do a public consultation to help understand what the public sees as the disparity between the 2 opportunities, in order to be able to return to council with the bullseye at long last. And so our recommendation in the accompanying report was to request an additional expenditure limit of $15,000 from the dedicated reserve from the legacy funds, and to extend the contract with Nordicity and JIMO to have the discussions with Streetcar that would help us to flesh out those pros and cons that Stephanie had mentioned, as well as to do a little bit of deeper dive into the opportunities and limitations of the St. Marie site.
Okay, that's very great. So now over to the public. Would anyone in the gallery like to come forward and address council?
Afternoon, Mayor. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. Yeah. Needs a little bend. Thank you. My name is Marie Rounding. I'm a resident of Collingwood, and I'm also chair of the board of directors of Theatre Collingwood. With me today is Jim Rowe, who is not only one of our board of directors, but he has also had a very successful career in theatre management. And also Valerie O'Brien, both of them right behind me, who is a senior staff member, and she is in charge of our marketing and development. So on behalf of our executive director, Erica Angus, who unfortunately is currently out of the country and would otherwise definitely be here, and on behalf of the rest of our staff and the Theatre Collingwood Board of Directors, I'd like to thank Director Culver and his department and all involved with the Collingwood Arts Centre feasibility study, which we're so pleased to see the report for. Theatre Collingwood is wholeheartedly in support of the findings in this report, and we encourage Council to move ahead quickly with this greatly needed project. Theatre Collingwood will celebrate its 40th anniversary next year as Collingwood's professional theatre company. And throughout those years, we have employed actors, singers, directors, musicians, technicians, designers, creative team members, and staff. We have entertained well over 100,000 people and delivered approximately 1,000 performances. We've also provided drama education programs for children, adults, and seniors. And we are only one component in a region robust with creators of various art forms. However, in modern times, Collingwood has never had a purpose-built space in which to create and entertain the community and visitors, or to instruct and develop future actors and art industry leaders. Theatre Collingwood has unfortunately had to use inadequate spaces which have compromised our ability to offer to the community. It has limited our scope, our size of audiences, and our ability to raise funds. Our options are very limited, and this threatens our very existence. It is worth noting that none of the facilities currently being used for theatre performance in our town meet accessibility standards. This feasibility study has been underway for 2 years already. Phase 2 of the study was to recommend one site. It is our opinion that the consultants have found that site in 48 St. Marie Street. It has always been our intention that the Centre for Arts and Culture be an economic driver, and in our view, this site will help achieve that economic impact. This location will keep it within walking distance to the restaurants, shops, and many accommodations that are in or close to downtown Collingwood. It would allow for easy access for any coach tours that would bring audience members to the Arts Centre from out of town. It would be close to the downtown and yet not cause congestion on the main street. And since this site is currently a parking lot, the cost to begin construction and the ease of beginning construction would be most appropriate. The Arts and Culture Centre would be located in Collingwood's already established arts district and would enhance the existing neighbourhood dynamic. The centre will not only be a hub for creators, but also for the community that would gather together in a most creative and positive way. It is our opinion that to spend further money and time to consult with Streetcar Development on a project they have already planned and submitted would only delay the Arts and Culture Centre project further, and in fact could even delay it significantly. It would cost more money, and in the end, we think that would only show how inappropriate it would be to try and add more onto the already complex terminals project. So today we are asking that this committee receive the staff report, PRC 2023-02, but reject the request for further consultation with the developers of the terminals project. We ask that Council then approve the project and instruct Director Culver to proceed with Phase 3 immediately, which will include the finding and hiring of an appropriate architectural firm, professional fundraiser, and project manager. Funding for these initial hirings is already available from the Arts and Culture Legacy Fund. The arts community and the residents of Collingwood have been waiting for this arts and cultural centre for a very long time. Proceeding with phase 3 immediately would help ensure the continued survival of theatre in Collingwood as we await the centre's build and completion. So I look forward to seeing you all at its groundbreaking, we hope in the very near future. I also hope to see you all at Theatre Collingwood's first performance of our subscription season starting April 11th with Dean Holland in Cold-Hearted. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Rounding, for your presentation. I see I have a question here on my left. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I did have a question written down here of your preferences for location, but you did answer that question. But I do want to make a comment on that. As much as it would be cool to see a theater at the terminals, I think that opens a whole can of worms as far as accessibility for traffic, residents who will be potentially living in the terminals. So I'm supporting your views on this. The one question I did have of you is, as far as theater size, what is your preference? As I don't think you mentioned that in your presentation.
No, our preference is for the recommendation of the report, and that is for, well, I guess they say the small, but it's really a medium size, 400, with the black box center as well. So there would be 2 performance spaces.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rounding.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. My name is John Kirby. First of all, I'd like to thank council members and Dean Culver and his staff for supporting this process over the last 2 years. We did this feasibility thing 31 years ago, but unfortunately times were different in 1992 than they are today. I speak to you today as board chair of the Collingwood Music Festival, as well as a longtime resident of this area. I have had the privilege of working in this community in the arts and recreation fields throughout my life, and even sat around a table similar to yours that you sit at today for 7 years. My hopes are that you will accept the recommendations, albeit tweaked a bit, that are contained in Nordicity's Phase 2 final report. Today, you are being asked to accept a report from staff regarding the future of a dedicated arts center for our town. This is a significant undertaking by this community. I would classify this using a term given in the past couple of years to describe projects evolving from the funds of the sale of Collis. This is a legacy project, one that when built would result in significant changes for our community, the effects of which would last lifetimes. This has occurred many times in the history of this community. Our early residents carved out an existence and found a place to live and built a thriving community on the basis of marine commerce that were the envy of every other community that existed on the Great Lakes. And more recently, decisions by councils and individuals who saw the need to build a downtown arena next door here in recognition of the men and women who served and fought for our freedom in World War II. Council and citizens who realized the importance of protecting and enhancing a vibrant downtown core with lots of businesses and commerce. And citizens who realized the need for parklands and a trail system, for accessible waterfront, and for short and long-range planning initiatives to guide the town into the future. And let us not forget the contributions of 2 individuals in this community who redesigned Simcoe Street, Rick and Uncle Lex. What an incredible facility they have created for arts in this town. Your worship and council members, by taking action and moving ahead right away with this legacy project, could do the following. Theatre Collingwood, after almost 40 years, would have a professional home. Give dance studios such as Fleetwood Dance a place to showcase the amazing talents of hundreds of dancers and eliminate the need for children, parents, grandparents, and friends from having to drive out of town in the middle of December in order to find a stage large enough on which to perform. This is a venue that could showcase Canadian and world-class musicians and artists, and a home stage for our own resident professional musicians from all music genres, some of whom who have performed in the greatest music halls in Canada and throughout the world, Daniel Nukowski and John McMurtry, just to name two. This could be a venue that could open doors for talented artists currently and in the future, those who are out there in our schools and community groups, and a home for the Collingwood Music Festival, for sound investment in choral works and other musical groups. And case in point with the Music Festival, since 2019, our budget has increased 525% in 4 years, sorry. 3 of our concerts last year were sold out in excess of 400 seats. And we anticipate a 35% increase in attendance this year, and we will soon be expanding our concerts into year-round concerts. This new center will also become a meeting place large enough to accommodate progress groups and Georgian Triangle lifelong learning, and for visual artists for showcasing and displaying their work. This would be a center that would provide tremendous economic benefits for businesses in our community. In closing, Your Worship and members of council and staff, this is once in a lifetime opportunity. Thanks to the thousands of dedicated citizens who have worked so hard to get to this point. I encourage you to do the following, to accept the following. The general principles of the Nordicity report with the St. Mary Street site. With all due respect, Nordicity and JAMO, I'm not sure whether any of you have ever traveled out to the Spit in the middle of February. I encourage council to commit to an immediate establishment of a timeline. I also encourage the hiring of a project manager with experience in finance, fundraising, and in the building of art centers. Let's create this new legacy for our town. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. Would anyone have questions? No. Okay. Would anyone else like to speak to the report? Please come forward.
John speaks so eloquently and is so passionate. It's wonderful to hear him talk. Good afternoon, Your Worship, Mayor Hamlin, and members of council. My name is Rob. Good. Back me. My name is Rob Hart, and I'm a member of the Case Group. Of the residents of Collingwood and the South Georgian Bay region. I'd like to begin by thanking Director Dean Culver and the staff of PRC for the efforts and commitment to the Arts Center project, and for initiating the 2 feasibility studies that bring us to the point we're at today. Let us acknowledge that this Arts Center project will be a legacy for our town. We're building this for our children, for our grandchildren, and for the children after them. The center will be enjoyed and utilized by the people of Collingwood and South Georgian Bay region for decades to come. It is time to move forward with this project. Although Case is disappointed with the size recommendation of the theater component, we recognize the need to move forward, and we wholeheartedly support moving ahead to the next stage of building an arts center. As we understand it, that stage is to secure the services of an architect, a project manager, and a fundraiser. Move us to the next stage. We strongly oppose adding the terminal location as a possible site for this build. The benefits of building on St. Marie Street significantly outweigh the terminal location. The town has recognized that we have an arts center hub, or an arts hub, and an arts district at St. Marie and Simcoe Street. And an arts center build in this area will become a focal point and the home for the arts in our town. The synergies and the spin-offs of benefits from a build in the arts hub are invaluable to the arts community. Furthermore, the economic impact with retail stores, restaurants, and bars being within steps of the center will realize that economic value that was in the study. St. Marie location is significantly more accessible for users, audiences, school programming, and youth. An arts center is active for 12 months a year. You really want to see school buses bringing school children to the Spit in the middle of February. Case Group respectfully requests that the council accept the report, but not spend the additional $15,000 to evaluate the terminal site. It is difficult to rationalize this location, and it will significantly delay the Arts Center build. As I said, we've been working on this for 4 years, and the town too, so it's getting long in the tooth. We would suggest instead that the consideration be given to use that $15,000 to secure an architect who has experience in building theaters and art centers. Let's get on with this legacy project. The town needs an arts center that can become the home of the arts community in our town. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Would anyone else like to address council? Would there be anyone online, Clerk Almas?
Thank you, Worship. We do have a number watching online. If anybody would like to address the staff report, please press that raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. There's no interest at this time, Your Worship.
Okay, so I'll read in the recommendation that staff report PRC 2023-02, Collingwood Arts Centre Feasibility Study, Phase 2 report be received, and the council approves an expenditure limit of $15,000. Let me just finish reading this. Okay. Hold on. Just wait. Okay. To extend the NGL Nordicity Group contract to facilitate additional site discussions with Streetcar Developments, Inc., and further public consultation with respect to the 2 recommended sites. And I'll look for a mover and a seconder in a minute. Okay, yes.
Hi, my name is Sue Ann Rothwell, and I, like John, was born in Collingwood and have seen a lot of changes over the years. And it's very interesting about the Arts Center. And I just have a question. So the Arts Center would be built, clearly St. Marie Street is a preference, which is the parking lot. I don't know if you tried to park around here recently, but it's not always easy. And it was unclear to me if we have to build underground parking or a parking garage, whose responsibility that is.
Director Culver, I'll ask you to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Probably the best answer I could give right now is that we had always imagined that the Phase 3 would be the design build part of the project, where those solutions would have to be established and developed through a costing model. We also have such concepts as downtown visioning exercises planned and whatnot that would all have to be kind of, in my opinion, taken into account to kind of understand what are the long-term impacts of such a facility.
I think it's fair to say we know that downtown is, stressed for parking, and that any facility that would take up a parking lot, we have to sort that. And that's basically what Director Collver has said.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's 200 parking spots needed when this facility is open for performances. And, that's obviously not the size of that parking lot. But then street parking, like I was raised on 471 St. Marie Street. And for instance, during the Santa Claus parade, the cars are parked all the way up that street, So I really think that's a big consideration.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think what's going to happen if council decides to move to phase 3, or when they do, the whole parking will be part of that next analysis, together with how should the building be designed. I see that all as one piece. But thank you for stepping forward and reminding us of that. Okay, so I've got a motion or a resolution here on the floor. Could I have a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor for discussion? Councillor Perry, thank you. Councillor Doherty, thank you. Who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Jeffrey.
I don't know as I want to start the discussion, but I want to ask to sever those, please.
Absolutely. So shall we deal with the receiving of the report? Okay. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. So now we're discussing the second part of the report, of the recommendation. Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
I first just want to recognize the amount of work that Nordicity and Director Collver and the PRC put into this. It's great to see that we're at this stage. I personally wouldn't be in favor for this additional expenditure, and I think the public has already spoken to a lot of these elements, in that I feel like we already know, if we have 2 locations identified, which one is the most appropriate. Speaking to traveling out there in the winter, but also speaking to 400 people leaving a theater down a single lane road with 1 traffic light, to me seems like a nightmare, not only for the attendees, but also the people who will live in that terminal building and the hotel guests that are staying there. So I think that in itself eliminates that as one of the possibilities for a location. Second to that, I think in any type of arts and culture center, it needs to have close access to restaurants and retail. So for that purpose, this puts it directly downtown, in my opinion. That's really all I wanted to say to this. So I wouldn't be in favor for the additional expenditure. I think it's time to move on to phase 3.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would agree with Councillor Houston. I would just say that on the slight chance that a streetcar has a positive response as to how this could be incorporated into their vision, I'd like to hear that. I wouldn't necessarily agree to pay $15,000 to hear that, but before the gavel comes down, if they've got some incredible concept that we really haven't considered, I'd like to know about it before voting, but I'm not sure that'll be the case. So I would agree with Councillor Houston that I can't see at this point a valid reason for putting it out by the terminals. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much. I will thank staff and Nordicity for such a thorough analysis. and in particular, a look at the economic factors that we would need to consider. And I am so pleased that the recommendation has come forward to take a more conservative approach and go with a smaller space. I just think that that makes sense. And you certainly, speaking to Nordicity, had the numbers to back that up in terms of potential revenues. I realize that, a big facility could have big possibilities, but I just would not be willing to take a flyer on the backs of Collingwood taxpayers. If there was a private interest that wanted to pick up and run with it, then I'd be all supportive. But it looks like this will be on the town in partnership with our various arts interest groups. So we need to plan conservatively. The other comment I will make is, and I completely support the comments that have been stated from the podium and my two colleagues, that I would not support any further investigation and looking at the terminals redevelopment project. I just, first of all, for the reasons that have already been stated in terms of the location and lack of other amenities and, the driving and the parking and so on, I totally agree. But we're looking at a highly complex project in its very early days. And so I could only see that regardless of what an additional investigation to the tune of $15,000 might discover, that we would be extending the time that we would have to wait for that option of an arts facility to come to fruition. So St. Marie Street, the recommended location, just makes all the sense in the world. And I would be very supportive of just moving forward to phase 3 and not spending the additional funds to further investigate the terminals as a potential option.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Excuse me. So thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So I agree with all my colleagues thus far. But I have questions. I mean, my frustration is, and we need to get to the financing part, because we know that some of that may be prohibitory as well if we can't find out how much is available out there. So I know you have to have something to show to fundraise, but we're spending a lot of money to get there to figure it out. So I agree it shouldn't be the terminals. I think you would hold up both projects, truthfully. It's not just about just holding up the Art Center. I think it would add another complexity to something we're already considering. So I wouldn't want to complicate both projects for it. So my question through to Director Culver has to do with, I agree that a St. Marie Street location is great, and maybe this is going to come into the design process that he referred to, but is there a difference in our ability to build underground parking? Does it differ between our 3 parking lots? Because I'm thinking there's an advantage now that we own 84 here, Ontario, and then we have the Pine Street parking, and then we have the Eddie Bush. And I'm hoping that we're not going to be looking at this singularly in terms of the other things we have in the go that we're trying to solve, such as staff accommodation, more parking, an arts center, de-risking our municipality. There's so many things we can combine into a project, and I hate to think that we're just... So will some of those things come into your design process?
Director Culver, do you want to have a go at that big question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Yeah, and it's a very, very big question, and I think I wish that I could say I have the right answer for you right this minute. I'm not sure that I do, and I'm not sure that I want to offer something off the top of my head because it is pretty complex. this project has been, focused on the idea of, what the community told us they wanted in phase one. Starting to answer questions about other uses as well as sort of solutions for parking creates a pretty significant complexity that I'm not 100% sure I can answer today. I think that it might be appropriate for us to take that concern under advisement and figure out how to build that into the phase 3 approach, which I'll admit that I'm not, prepared tonight to provide, credible detail in terms of the costing of it. And, we have definitely some high level views of how it would be accomplished, but we have to kind of do a little bit more work to get down to sort of what is the value of that and what would we be asking council to withdraw from the legacy fund to support. So without really kind of answering your question very adequately, I'm hopeful that you'll know that we see the problem and that you're discussing and the opportunity you're actually describing, and think that it would be appropriate for that to be a part of a design build approach, subject to more thought and thinking in terms of including consultation with my colleagues.
So just by way of follow-up through the mayor. Yeah, so that was really my question is, can these questions go into that design discussion? And, my druthers might have been to identify a parking lot situation versus a specific, but if it's going to hold it up at all, then I'm not keen on doing that. If we can solve the other things within the recommended parking lot that's identified in your report. So that's all I need right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Your Worship, I have one question that came from a constituent that claimed that 48 St. Marie was a NVCA designated floodplain and therefore couldn't be built upon. Can I get some response from staff as to whether that is an accurate statement, and would that fundamentally change this whole discussion? I would suppose it would be Director Slama, would it?
Would Director Slama be online today?
I am here, Your Worship. Hi, good afternoon. Sorry, if Councillor Baines could repeat the question, please.
48 St. Marie is a designated NVCA floodplain and therefore could not be developed with this proposed structure as is anticipated.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Baines, I need to look at the mapping, confirm on the mapping, but I think you might be right. It doesn't necessarily mean that something can't be built, but there will be some requirements and review by the NVCA.
Thank you.
Required.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor. Oh, wait, did you wish to add in something, Peter?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I wanted to ask a question, and I think I'll be right transparent. We've talked quite a bit about the funds being legacy funds from Collis sale, and everyone knows at this table that I feel that that's come at the expense of life cycle reserve and working capital reserve, which has caused tax increases this year. So I'm those legacy funds. I wanted to know, there was $1.5 million put into the fund. The report talks about 1.4 being available now. But if I get this right, 50,000 was the original budget. And then from the purchases report that we have coming a little bit later, an additional almost $100,000 was approved for part of this. So that's 150,000, which would bring it down to $1,350,000, unless there's an interest component. And I guess through yourself to the treasurer or to Director Culver, is that why we're saying there's $1.4 million available?
Director Culver, would you like the treasurer to answer that, or do you?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I would be thrilled if the treasurer would answer that.
Hello, Treasurer Quinlan. Would you like to answer
thank
that?
Your Worship, and through you. If I could just ask the Deputy Mayor, I caught the tail end, but I missed the originating part of the question.
I was asking about the 1.5 that is designated as legacy funds for the Arts Center. And in the report, it refers to having 1.4 million available. But my understanding from what was presented was there was 50,000 in budget, and then the approval of a special purchase last year was almost 100,000. So I net that down to 1.35 million, unless there's an interest component that's gone into there.
If I may, Your Worship, I'm just pulling up our reserve information right now. So 2022 ended at 1.4 as the information is posted by Director Collver. I believe there is interest that's included, so it did earn about $20,000 worth of interest over the last year. And I'm sorry, I'd have to look in to see funding wise what is missing out of that, but I don't believe we had anything taken out for, well, I know we haven't funded anything in that way for 2022 yet.
If I may, Mayor Hamlin, that's okay. I think that's fine for right now. The interest was the question I was really asking about. And then I guess through Director Culver, I wanted to ask about, the report talks about the average subsidy for similar size, the 400 size, being $465,000 for a year. And Collingwood, I think it set a parameter of 250. So within the analysis components of the report, is it determining that there's a $250,000 annual subsidy or a $465,000 annual subsidy?
Director Culver?
So thank you through you, Mayor Hamlin. I will defer to Nordicity to help with that answer since they did the actual analysis. I would like to also assure council that we've always imagined that the third phase would include a more detailed business analysis and developing a business plan that would be more. Once we know what we're building, this is all based on averages. But I'll defer to Peter or Natalia or Caitlin for an answer if they could, please.
Thank
you. Yes, in phase one, when we did the math for both sizes, we came up with within 200,000 to 300,000 as a deficit. That was certainly, we wanted to present that there's no such thing as running a community arts center that is a for-profit, on a for-profit basis, really. And then when we looked at phase two at the other venues, the larger venues showed deficits of $1 million or so. And certainly for St. Catharines, for example, that was well worth it given what they got out of the whole arts center complex that they had. And the other, even the smaller ones, which Caitlin could go over in detail if we want, were a bit surprisingly to us, it's around 400,000 or 500,000 themselves. So we look back in our 250 and we say, well, if you get everything right, and Collingwood is probably better bet than they would be, just because they're smaller communities, let's say, then you got a fighting chance to do 250. But you have to watch it if you're further down the road, you're looking at an operating basis, that it would be on the more positive side if you did that, to make it only 250. But we didn't go through another analysis per se and readjust the market sizes, because we just didn't want to redo the work that we had done before. It was a question of risk. Are you going to make those market projections or not? But certainly, I would be. It's a very good question. I'd be wary about what the deficit will be, but there will be one. But if it's probably containable in the medium size.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yes, that was okay. I guess the problem I'm having with the whole thing is, to me, parking is one of the major issues. And I understand everybody keeps talking about moving to phase 3, and then we can figure out about the parking and what it's going to cost and what the issues might be. And I sit there and say, it looks to me like it's going to, from the increased cost of the projected value of the facility, or cost for the facility, without the soft costs in, without any investment in parking, any cost of capital component. I sit there and I look at it, and I would have really liked to have seen an awful lot more information about parking in this particular phase of it, because it makes me question whether going to phase 3 is going to be just futile in the long run. So I supported the receiving of the report because I think we need to receive the report. I think there's nothing wrong with the analysis and the work in the report, other than the things that I think are missing. I think I look at it, and it does talk about there's competing priorities out there. The hospital certainly is at the top of everybody's mind. We've been approached by Georgian Triangle Humane Society, and we know my friend's house is interested in doing something. I really am struggling to see moving this forward to another phase. So those are my comments.
Thank you. So I'm not going to repeat things that have been said this afternoon, but I'll just say I wanted to start by, again, thanking Director Collver and the team that's done the presentation this afternoon. A lot of thinking's gone into this. You had 2 jobs. What's the location and what's the size? And thank you so much for that analysis and for bringing it in the time frame that you said it would be delivered, because we've been so anxious to move this forward, well, most of us at least. I also am in favor of the downtown location for the reasons that have been stated, and I'll just add to the thought that because we're still at the infancy with the terminal's revitalization, and we don't yet have development agreements in place and so on, I'd hate to see the project get delayed while we're sorting that through. The other good thing I think about a downtown location, is again, other than what's been said, is that I love the concept of our downtown expanding beyond the main street. And this will just be so much of an additional anchor on the east side, where our burgeoning arts community is already well off and running. I am not as concerned about the parking because I have seen in my life prior to being on council that parking lots are development sites. And if you spent any time in downtown Toronto, you know that as a community builds out, the parking lots eventually lose their status as development holding sites and are used, and parking is found elsewhere. That wasn't the goal of this phase of the report, and I'm confident we'll figure out our parking as we move forward. In terms of the size of the theater, I do appreciate the conservative nature of what's been brought forward, and no one, including me, wants to put our community in any kind of financial jeopardy. But I would like to, I just want to make a comment and then I'll ask a question. My comment's this: I noticed that there was a lot of discussion in the report around the population of Collingwood and how much or how many people would be here to support an arts center. I look at it a little differently because I know that our community of Collingwood supports the South Georgian Bay area as a center for where they not only shop and get professional services and so on, but also for their arts and culture needs. And I'm talking about the town of Blue Mountains and Clearview and Meaford to an extent and Wasaga Beach. And there are, a lot of people in those areas. The Institute of Southern Georgian Bay looks at Collingwood as being part of a community of 100,000 people. The other point I noticed in the report was that the town of Orillia or city of Orillia was seen to have a market reach of about 500,000 people, and I believe the report was looking out at about 100 kilometers around the town. I think if we looked at 100 kilometers around Collingwood, we would easily be at 500,000. So I raise this not because I want to go out on a limb on the size of the theater, but just that I want to always keep in mind that this theater could be more successful than we're going to give it credit to. And so my question is this. I noticed that between the main theater and the black box theater, we'd have a combined number of seats of between 650 and 750, which to me would allow us perhaps to bring in the big acts. We know our music offerings already are at 400 seats. All right, so it's going to press. So can those two, the black box and the main theater, is there any possibility they could be designed so they could be used together if the need arose?
I think that's a question for you, Stephanie. I know you don't want to do it live, but go ahead.
I believe we came to the conclusion of having two theaters for the sake of being able to have two different shows happening at the same time, and also to accommodate smaller theater groups and community groups who maybe can't fill a 400 to 500 capacity. So the intention through consultation was that the programming would be separate. That being said, we're at the feasibility stage. We haven't even started the design process. We're not close to schematic design, where you would hire not just an architect, but a landscape architect and a civil engineer, structural, mechanical, all those things. So the design of the facility isn't set in stone at this point. So if throughout the process it's determined that there would be desire for some sort of flexibility, that could absolutely be explored.
Thank you. Those are my comments. Any other questions or comments? So what do we have on the floor here? The expenditure of $15,000. Would anyone like to bring forward an amendment to that? Okay, I will. Do you want to?
Actually, not an amendment, but rather if it was the will of council to defeat that portion of the motion, then perhaps an addition directing staff to proceed to phase 3. That would be my thought.
I'm happy to do that. Okay, so we'll deal with the second part of this. All those in favor? And
Of what specifically?
oh, sorry, just to be clear, we're now dealing with the second paragraph of the resolution. The council approves the expenditure of $15,000 to facilitate additional site discussions with streetcar and further public consultation with respect to the two recommended sites. So we're voting on whether to do that or not. All those in favor? And those opposed? That's unanimous, thank you. And did you want to bring forward an additional recommendation? Councillor Doherty.
Yes, please. And that staff proceed to implementation of phase 3 of the development activity and phase 3 of the development plan. But if I could also add that there was an option for additional public consultation within the motion that we just defeated. And I'm wondering if we can include that direction as well for additional public consultation as part of the phase 3 development process.
I would sort of expect this might be. Director Culver, where do you see the public weighing in this process?
Through your worship, if maybe I could make a suggestion for the next steps. Just given that jumping straight into phase 3 without us understanding the full range and scope of costings and whatnot might be. It might be. I'm not prepared for that, I would guess. And so, if staff could be directed to return to council expediently with a proposal or a recommendation for and a request for accessing the legacy fund to support phase 3. That would give give us a better opportunity to sort of construct what phase 3 looks like. As mentioned before, we have some high level ideas based on some things that have been shared from Nordicity and JIMO, but we're not ready to make a detailed recommendation at this point, and I think that would be responsible of us to do.
Okay, what saith you, Councillor Doherty?
I would agree with that. If that's staff recommendation, then absolutely that staff would come back to council expediently with a recommendation for a process to pursue phase 3.
Would there be a seconder for this? Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. That was a great discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who attended. Okay, the next we have another staff report. It is 6.2, and this has to do with our corporate climate change action plan and greenhouse gas reduction pathway feasibility study. Who would be presenting this afternoon? Okay. Executive Director Peg.
Thank you, Worship. I wasn't sure if the gentleman was coming up to say something before I spoke, but this afternoon we do have 3 individuals that will be making a presentation to council. We have Nicole Yardy, who's our climate change specialist, Adam Gallant, Fleet and Facilities Coordinator, and Jill Landry, who's also a Fleet and Facilities Coordinator. So they'll be co-presenting on the Corporate Climate Action Plan as well as the GHG feasibility study.
Fantastic. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and good afternoon, Council. The 3 of us today are here to present the Greener Collingwood Corporate Climate Change Action Plan, which was developed in response to Collingwood's declaration of a climate crisis in 2019. Do we have the PowerPoint presentation coming up? Okay. I'll go ahead while we're waiting. So the Greener Collingwood Corporate Climate Change Action Plan follows the Partners for Climate Protection, or PCP's, protocol, and upon adoption will satisfy corporate milestones 2 and corporate milestone 3 of the PCP's 5 milestone framework. As a reminder to both the community and council, milestone 1 of the PCP program consisted of the development of a corporate greenhouse gas, or GHG, inventory for the baseline year of 2019, which illustrated that the town of Collingwood produced approximately 3,370 tons of CO2 equivalent from corporate operations. This includes emissions associated with fleet, buildings, water and wastewater, solid waste, and streetlights. The town has also developed a community GHG inventory for 2019, which estimated that the community as a whole produced approximately 207,218 tons of CO2 equivalent in 2019. I'll quickly note that these inventories are not static. There have been and may continue to be small adjustments in the 2019 baseline inventories as more information becomes available. However, we are using the best of available data as of March 2023, and the numbers are not expected to change significantly. Next slide, please. The visions of the Corporate Climate Change Action Plan are as follows: to integrate climate change and sustainability into the town of Collingwood's corporate culture, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2019 levels by 2030, and to become a corporate and municipal leader in sustainability initiatives and greenhouse gas reduction measures in the region. I'll quickly note that the asterisk beside the second goal there is to signify that the 30% reduction is an increase from the report we presented in September of 2022, which stated that we would provide at least a 20% GHG reduction. Next slide, please. In order to achieve the 3 goals on the previous slide, the plan's broken into 5 sectors of action: buildings and facilities, transportation and fleet, solid waste, environment and biodiversity, and behavior and culture change. The first 3 sectors are where the town will be able to study and measure large greenhouse gas reduction or emission reduction. And the last 2 sectors were included to enhance the PCP requirements and to ensure that the other 2 visions of integrating sustainability into corporate culture and becoming a corporate and municipal leader will also become realized through the implementation of this plan. In order to be conscious of time, I'll list off the actions outlined in each of these sectors without getting into too many specifics, but we are available to answer more specific questions at the end. Next slide, please. So town-owned buildings and facilities, which includes water and wastewater infrastructure, account for 55.4% of corporate greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. The goal of this sector is to reduce building emissions by 50% in 10 years and 80% in 20 years, following the Federation of Canadian Municipalities greenhouse gas reduction pathway. How we're going to get there? On existing buildings, this will consist of completing a greenhouse gas reduction pathway feasibility study, followed by completing the suggested retrofits, switching to LED lighting, and ensuring staff education and training are incorporated into the adoption of any new technologies. In any new buildings, the town will need to strongly consider near net zero emission designs to limit any additional GHG emissions being produced as much as possible. As you can see from the table here, the largest reduction in GHG emissions will come from completing the building retrofits of existing buildings, and that will be primarily looking to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Next slide, please. The town's transportation and fleet sector account for 33.5% of corporate greenhouse gas emissions, and the goal for this sector is to reduce light duty and heavy duty fleet emissions by 30% by 2030. In order to decarbonize the town's current fleet, consideration will need to be given to converting to a zero emissions fleet, installing corporate vehicle charging stations, and decarbonizing small equipment and off-road fleet. In addition to this, we also own a fleet of buses to supply public transportation to the community. Opportunities to reduce GHG emissions associated with public transportation will come from the switch to on-demand transit and replacing our current fleet with electric buses. More details on the GHG reduction potential of electric buses and heavy-duty fleet will become available upon the completion of the Metrolinx transportation study. Next slide, please. Solid waste accounts for just over 10% of our corporate emissions, and the goal of this sector is to reduce waste by 20% by 2030. Strategies to reduce waste will come from the completion of waste audits at municipal buildings and facilities, as well as increased staff education. Next slide. And as mentioned previously, actions included in the environment and biodiversity sector might not necessarily result in significant GHG emission reductions. However, it will be important for the town to continue initiatives associated with measuring and monitoring environmental indicators, exploring opportunities and availability for carbon sequestration, and monitoring the amount of environmentally protected land in Collingwood. Next slide. Similarly, the actions identified in the behavior and culture change sector have the potential to reduce GHG emissions, but are more aligned with the vision of integrating climate change and sustainability into the town's corporate culture. Actions in this sector include adding climate lens assessments to staff reports and major projects, exploring and implementing green procurement practices, integrating climate change into policies, procedures, and plans, staff and council education, and intergovernmental and interagency collaboration. Next slide. The following actions are also important in ensuring the plan's goals are realized, and Collingwood will continue to comply with registered programs as well as Ontario regulations. This includes continuing to monitor our energy and emissions, corporate climate change action plan renewal every 5 years, as well as corporate progress reports on a biennial basis at minimum. Staff is also actively engaging with the community, and progress is being made towards the creation of a community climate action plan. We do have one missing slide from this slide deck. I'll apologize. There were some technical difficulties. However, when considering the financial implications of the plan, some caution is needed in the adoption of the recommended 30% corporate target, as costing to achieve this goal is not in place. More information will be known in 2024 upon the completion of 2 studies. Firstly, the greenhouse gas reduction pathway feasibility study, and secondly, the Metrolinx transportation study. Actions that have already been started or will be completed this year have already been budgeted through the 2023 budget cycle. Next slide. Apologies for the yellow there. But as you may have noticed, a major aspect of realizing the 30% greenhouse gas reduction target by 2030 is the greenhouse gas reduction pathway feasibility study and implementation of retrofits. I'll now pass the presentation over to Jill Landry and Adam Gallant to take you through what that process will look like and provide more detail.
Thank you. So in order to meet that 30% corporate target, 25% of that is going to be from our facilities and buildings, which means an actual 50% reduction in greenhouse gases within our buildings. So we want to take the next portion of the presentation just to talk about our vision of how we will meet those targets. So first of all, GHG reduction pathway, what is that? So basically, it's a greenhouse gas reduction pathway, and it's defined by the federal Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund as a sequence of GHG reduction measures that allow local recreation and cultural facilities to achieve 50% GHG reduction in 10 years and 80% GHG reduction in 20 years. So that's our 50%, which will give us the 25% that we need for our corporate target. We'll note here that the fund allows other municipal buildings to be included, provided that there is a minimum of at least one recreation or cultural facility. So the first step in the reduction pathway is the feasibility study, and this will help get us to a specific scenario on how to achieve the targets while considering our unique challenges, such as our building conditions of our buildings currently, our budgets, planned equipment renewal cycles. The Green Municipal Fund has grants available for both the study and the actual retrofit stages. Oh, sorry, next slide here. And 2 slides. We'll jump 3 slides here. One more. That's great. So here's the funding. So basically the Federal Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund has a maximum of $200,000 available to cover 80% of eligible costs, which we have applied for. And in addition to that, there'll be another 20%, and that cost has equal to $50,000, and that's already been approved in our 2023 budget for this project. Next slide, please. So where are we currently on this project? The town has completed and had our pre-application for the Green Municipal Fund approved. We've submitted now our full application, which is currently under review, and we've issued our request for proposal in order to retain a specialized consultant to perform the study. So that's currently on the open market, and we're waiting for proposals to come in. Adam's going to further review what's involved in the study in the next few slides. However, for the Green Municipal Fund application, we also want to highlight that we've been assigned a Green Municipal Fund project officer, and that we're working closely with them to ensure we have a strong and complete application. The officer has already confirmed that our application meets the eligibility criteria. However, it still needs to pass the Green Municipal Fund peer review process for funding approval. Next slide, please. So as part of the town's current Green Municipal Fund application, as well as the request proposal that we currently have on the market, we've included 42 buildings, and those are listed on the slide here. Most of them, most of them are the town facilities. Most of the town facilities are included on this slide. The only ones that haven't been included are some of the smaller greenhouse gas emitting facilities. However, we have all of our parks and recreation buildings, and so we only needed at least one of those buildings to meet the qualifications. But we've also included our administration, library, public works building, and our water and wastewater facilities, including our wastewater treatment plant, as well as numerous pumping stations. Next slide, please. So now, before I pass the presentation over to Adam, here are the questions that will be answered in the next few slides. So the process. How does this study mesh with our asset management plan? How do we anticipate the study will be conducted? Where we will need support and when we will need to make the decisions and commitments? The outcomes. What are the ideal outcomes? Where's the risk? And also the program needs. After the study is complete, what do we expect the program needs to be to ensure we meet the targets identified in the study?
Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Nicole. All right, you already have the next slide up there. So I was last year in January, and I spoke about the asset management plan and our facility condition assessments. So this, I thought, was a good place to start. How does it relate to our asset management plan for the town and both for facilities? So as you know, there's horizontal infrastructure, water, wastewater assets, facilities and parks, and IT infrastructure that all have an asset management plan. But the facilities are the largest emitter. So this is why we're starting here. And we found this grant to be most in line and have some very aggressive greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. But the fact that this fits in here as part of our asset management plan leads us to our first risk. All the work that we're going to need to do that comes out of the study that's recommended needs to compete against all of our other asset management work. Roads need to be reconditioned, buildings need to be painted, flooring needs to be replaced. And these things have little to do with greenhouse gas emissions, but this is still the same team that's going to be looking after that and trying to organize that work. So again, like Jill and Nicole have already mentioned, the study's going to look at our condition assessment data that we did recently in 2021 and our energy consumption data, which we've now organized in a nice, tidy way, and recommend projects that we need to plan, budget for, and do over the next 20 years to reach these targets. And so by committing to this program, it allows Nicole to set the targets in our corporate action plan. Slide, please. So a few things about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Feasibility Study Guidance document. This was provided by the Green Municipal Fund, and it was excellent. It gave a really good overview of what the steps of the study need to be. So I'll start there. We basically made this a contractual requirement. We're confident we're going to get the funding. It's not finalized yet, but the requirements of the contract documents are to follow this guidance document. Some of the language in the guidance document is a little bit soft. They talk about minimum requirements and best practices. And the best way I can explain this is when you do the energy audit and the energy analysis of a building, it may be more work than is required for a small building or a small, public washroom or something like that. We want to look at everything, but we also want to have flexibility to maximize the value of the grant. We want to get as many buildings done as we can. So this leads us to our second risk here that I'm going to mention. We don't have bids for the work yet for the study, so depending on what that comes in at, we have to look at it and say which buildings are our priorities, and obviously for us it's going to be the ones which are the highest emitters. Another interesting part of the guidance document is a required outcome. So the study must articulate one greenhouse gas reduction pathway selected through a comparison of at least 2 greenhouse gas reduction pathway scenarios. This means we need to make some decisions on which way we want to go through the process of this study over the next approximately year. And again, another main reason why we're doing this study is because it's going to position us for other grants. So as per the guide, the final study document to identify prospective national and regional incentives and programs for capital projects, including the GBR-GHG reduction pathway capital projects. These words are a mouthful of the titles of these studies. But anyways, at the end of the day, you need a study like this to get other grants. And in particular, the Green Municipal Fund has a GHG retrofit grant where this study is the prerequisite for it. So it kind of shows you how we're trying to get there. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to talk about the 7 steps of this study. Just go quickly through how we expect this to roll out. Step 1, after we get an award, after the RFP, will be the site investigation. I think we're well positioned with our condition assessment data and our energy dashboard, along with the drawings and maintenance records we can provide. But I've already met with department heads and say we're going to need some support from staff to do these site visits and get the most out of we can while the consultants here looking at our facilities to see where they can make changes in greenhouse gas emission reductions. Step 2, we expect a lot of this work to take place off-site. Once they gather the data from site, they can do the calibrated modeling of existing facilities off-site. And this doesn't need to be, you have to completely do all of step 1 before you can move on to step 2. So depending on the consultant that we're working with, I'm okay if they get the information they need and start on step 2, within a few weeks of doing the site visit. It doesn't have to be one, it has to be complete before the other. We're going to look at each individual facility. So it depends where they're at with that. The design workshop. So the minimum requirements in the guidance document is to have a workshop, and they speak to best practices, which would involve a higher level of commitment from the town. So this is with respect to operations, financial, and setting specific goals. So the earlier we can do that, the better. This part's interesting in that the measured level analysis takes place off-site, but the minimum requirements from the guidance document are a full facility fuel switch from fossil fuels and renewable energy generation. That's the minimum. So it goes up from there. So it's going to be an aggressive study in the sense of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So we're not going to go through all these projects, but these are the type of projects that they need to be studied with respect to our facilities. So back when we say full facility switch away from fossil fuels, it would be usually one of these type of projects. So instead of going into these projects right now, we can go to the next slide because you can kind of group them into these categories. Should be clear now, our strategy is to reduce fossil fuel consumption. So where we have natural gas burning equipment in our facilities, we replace it with electric equipment if we can. And then from there, we lower the consumption of that electrical equipment through renewables and energy recovery and renewables. In some cases, we may have natural gas burning equipment where it's not feasible to replace it with electric systems. So we replace it with a more efficient system. In both the case, whether it's a more efficient natural gas system or an electrical system, the other kind of, I would say, pocket of types of measures and projects that we're going to need to look at is reducing the energy demand as low as possible. Things are like air sealing and insulation and that kind of category, building envelope category of work and controls as well would be another one. So potential risks. As I mentioned, it's clear our strategy is to reduce natural gas consumption. That's our quickest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But when we do that, we need to remember we put natural gas in our facilities because it was cheaper. It's cheaper to run than electricity, appliances. But that energy gap is changing with the rise in pricing and with carbon pricing. That's going to affect where that gap is and how quickly that's going to close in. Another risk is electrical infrastructure demands. And this is, I think, best exemplified just by a simple example. Let's say you have a gas hot water heater in a facility. You want to put an electric one in. You go back to the panel and there's no space. Now you need a bigger panel. Now you need a bigger switchboard. This goes all the way back out to the pole feeding the building outside where you may have to upgrade your service to do some of these projects. That's, to me, is a project risk with this approach. And then variable emission factors. So our emissions, the way we calculate them, are based on consumption, whether natural gas consumption or electricity consumption. And in the case of the electrical consumption, we don't set that emission factor. That's based on what the grid is generating. So if that changes, so do our emissions. If they start up a coal-fired power plant tomorrow, then our emissions go up without us doing anything at all. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's just when we set these targets, we need to understand where these come from. And the other one with the emission factors is our understanding and the science changes. The way that those are calculated and what they choose to account for can change. And we've already seen some changes in the wastewater processes and the emissions they calculate associated with wastewater processes. So we don't set those factors, but if we're told by the broader public sector, who do we do the reporting to, that the emission factors have changed, that's going to impact our targets. All right, next slide, please. Okay, on to step 5. This is when we do step 5 is the package, scenario package analysis. So we expect this to be off-site work. What stood out to me here was there was a statement in the guidance document that said, if there are no recommendable options that achieve an 80% reduction within the study period, an additional narrative can be included in the study explaining why. So to me here, the potential risk is they come in and do the study, you can't meet the 80%. Well, why is that? Now that, although that's unlikely, we have been doing energy reduction related projects and we're going to continue to do them. We don't have this grant yet. We already have work planned like LED upgrades and replacements. I know the rec facilities have done some ice plant improvements in the past. So those shouldn't stop, but we just need to recognize some of what we think they're going to come and recommend we've already done. So my expectation there would be more focused on renewables and energy recovery versus changing systems that we may have already upgraded. Step 6, decision-making workshop. So once they do the package level analysis, it's time to decide on what we want to select and have in our facilities. So I think on my role here, I'll be pushing to make decisions. Without decisions, there'll be delays. And next slide, please. Step 7, the final report. So the report should outline the pathway scenarios that allow the facility to achieve the targets within the required time frame. And we've also asked in the contract documents that the consultant present the results of the study in a council meeting at some future date when they're done the study. So this is interesting for me. Like we're speaking about a feasibility study that we're going to do, but really this is the starting point of the work that we need to do to meet the targets. So we need to keep that in mind, that we have this study done now, and here's a huge list of projects that needs to get done, or at least that's how I'm viewing what we're going to get. So, next. All right, ideal outcomes. We go right into that. We do the work recommended in the study. We need to do this work. It's a feasibility study. This can't sit on the shelf. We need to do these projects in the facilities to achieve the target. This is going to require long-term financial and resource commitments. And my risk here to the program is we don't have those commitments or the framework to deliver the work. So we're thinking right now, what do we need to put in place to do this? Another ideal outcome is that we become well positioned for grants. I mentioned it's often a prerequisite for other grants. The GMF, GHG Impact Retrofit this study is a prerequisite for that. And this one example I want to give there is that second grant is for 25% up to a $5 million project in funding to do a retrofit. So that's $1.25 million. We still need to come up with the other 3.75. So just having the grant doesn't get us there across the line, right? So in order to get the grant, we need to show that we're ready, which this study will do. We also need to show that we're going to be able to execute the work and have the funding commitments behind it to execute the work if we get it. Some of the grants don't exist yet. A lot of grants, what we've looked at so far, have had energy reduction targets. There aren't as many that focus this aggressively on greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. You can do other grants to save energy, but we're talking about the climate action plan now, and we need to focus on greenhouse gas emissions. That's how it's laid out. Another risk, some measures, especially if we get into renewable energy generation and other measures that can add operational complexity, will require more staff resources. And funding will typically only cover the direct project costs. So I don't want to put a complex system into a building where the operators don't have the support that they need to operate it, is basically what I'm saying. That's a risk. Kill two birds with one stone. I like this one because we align the needs or what we need to do in this study with our asset management plan. It'll allow us to demonstrate the cost difference between the direct replacement of our assets and the greener option. We'll also be able to align the life cycle needs of our facilities with this study and hopefully get them funded. So in the meantime, our risk is we can't wait. We have facilities with equipment that breaks down and needs to be replaced. How do we position ourselves now to make sure they don't put a system in that we have to live with for the next 20 years that may not have been the best choice from a greenhouse gas emission reduction perspective? Slide, please. All right, here's what we need for the program to be successful. We need to implement this work that the study is going to recommend. And we need to implement work that we can support. And I said, no white elephants allowed. If you don't know what that is, it's a troublesome or useless piece of equipment from what I'm used to that doesn't always have the resources needed to operate properly. So we need to remember that more complex systems may require additional training, service support, or staff resources. If this is not provided, what could be a good system could become a white elephant. Implementing newer technology can be a risk, and then it does not always perform as promised. In my previous role at my last job, one of the things we learned from an energy performance contract as we prepared to do a second one was that staff and operations weren't properly consulted as far as they're the ones that are going to be operating it at the end of the day. But also the post-project support, we didn't put enough post-project support in there. We put a real focus on contractual guarantees and meeting the performance that was promised to us, and also monitoring and verification. Now, those are activities like after they're done and everybody's happy and you walk away from the project, this can sometimes go on for years to make sure that the system is working as it's designed and as it was intended to meet the targets we need. Long-term commitments, 20 years is 5 councils. So that's what we're trying to set ourselves up for. 30% corporate target. So I know we want to be aggressive, but also realistic. I need to go back to Nicole and say, here's what we can do. Here's what I think we can do. And we feel that the 15-80% reduction for facilities are aggressive and realistic with the proper support. We acknowledge that the federal government has more aggressive targets, but we don't have an update on their progress or an understanding of how they will get there. And even if we were to eliminate fossil fuels from our facilities, there's still GHG emissions associated with the power consumption. So if we were to set net zero as a goal, we need to be, I think, more on the line of renewable power generation on a scale that we're not set up for currently. So I think that's all I had. I think that's the next slide. And it goes back to the vision. And a reminder, this is a corporate plan. This isn't facilities. This is going to need support from, it's going to need support from the public. It's going to need support from this council and future councils. It's going to need support from our leadership and our staff to get there. That's all I had.
Thank you. That was good. Would any members of the public like to speak to council about this? Welcome.
Your Worship, Mayor Hamlin and Deputy Mayor Fryer, and the rest of council, thanks for your time. My name is Kevin Tone. I also want to thank the staff that worked on this plan. Just listening to this has been really enlightening, and my ask has been made a little harder. I'm here just to start with some of a lot of the positives I see in this report. And I'll have an ask for a little bit of a stretch at the end. And I look at this document as a living, learning document that has been produced. And there are a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of balls in the air, and I can appreciate that from an operational point of view. I have some experience with retrofitting some of the buildings at Blue Mountain and the fleet there. There is, when you develop a culture of sustainability and decisions made with a climate lens and integrating climate change into the policies, procedures, and purchasing, staff and council education, green procurement practices, those I would call it the soft things as part of this. And I'm really here to ask you to consider a little bit of a stretch for a number of reasons. We live in a beautiful part of Southern Ontario, South Georgian Bay. We attract people. I think we attract people with green feelings for the area. We may be able to attract green businesses based on our climate action plan. So there's a lot of a lot of details that your staff member just went through, and they're there, they're real, and I realize that. I feel that there may be an opportunity in your fleet program. You apparently have 91 vehicles, and I see 3 or 4 are being replaced in the next year. I wonder what, if you kept 3 or 4 going for the next 6 or 7 years to get you to 2030, what that would come up with as a pathway to increasing the vehicle thing. I realize the buildings and facilities is a lot of hard slogging work. But I hope there's an opportunity with the fleet. And I realize that that Metrolinx has a project going on, considering electric buses and all that, and hopefully that'll come in the next, short period of time, in a year or 2, and will educate us as to what direction we should go with the transit fleet, since I see that as another big opportunity in that area. So it comes down to, we want to set a goal that stretches a little bit, like 40%. And I see 7 years of all those kind of culture changes adding up and making a bigger adjustment to this plan than we may be thinking, with the hard nuts and bolts of buildings and facilities. That's my ask tonight. Oh, I should say that the team leader of our group is, maybe she'll show up at 5 o'clock. So I'm pinch hitting tonight, and that's what I'm here to say. If council would consider a stretch or what they feel is attainable. Very much for your time.
Thank you. Would there be any other member of the public in the gallery who would like to speak to council? Clerk comments, anyone online today?
Thank you, Worship. If there are any participants online wishing to address the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature. And we do have Catherine Daw.
Hello, Ms. Daw. Would you like to address council now?
Yes, thank you. Kevin was worried I wasn't going to be here, but I've been here since 2 o'clock. So thank you for the opportunity. I will certainly echo Kevin Tone's comments with regard to the depth and breadth of the presentation that's been made. And I know that it's not easy. You've got a lot of moving parts when you're trying to figure out how you're going to deal with the challenge of emissions and how we get there. I have 2 comments that follow what Kevin has been saying. And one is certainly that, when we came back and expressed our concern back in the fall, winter time, November, December time, we did say that we felt that there was not a sufficient stretch goal to a 20% was certainly too low. And we feel the same thing at the CCAT level, that 30% also is not enough of a stretch, given the fact that we need to all within the entire world accelerate and increase our efforts, not do what we think we can't necessarily do. The solutions are there. And I do think that there is an opportunity to do more than what you can achieve. And I think you'll be surprised by how much you will actually be able to achieve and get further than you want. Sometimes when we don't make that a stretch goal, then we do just good enough, which means it would be just 30% as opposed to something that could be more substantial and impact our community in a much greater way. And I certainly would think that there will be some ways that you can do that, such as only looking at the largest emitter buildings and not necessarily look at all of the buildings that you've got, so that you can really focus on that. And I think we all know what those are. The pool and the arenas come to mind for me. So I think that also what was supposed to have come back was that there were going to be a number of options presented to council, not a single option. And I don't know if that is something that the staff took into account. That was the understanding that I had at from the last time that we spoke about this GHG corporate plan. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I will come back, but I'd just like to hear based on my comments so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yardy, do you have any comments on this, or who's the best person to answer the questions posed?
I can certainly start, and then perhaps Adam and Jill have something to add. First of all, I thank Kevin and Catherine for making their comments. They're both part of CCAT, and we've been in communication through the development of this plan. In terms of the question about multiple pathways being presented, that certainly is the one of the outcomes that we expect from FCM's greenhouse gas reduction pathway feasibility study. There will be at least 2 pathways that come forward to be considered, and council will have the opportunity at that point to discuss which pathway looks more feasible for our community. Unfortunately, we just don't have that information right now before that study has been completed. Not sure if Adam and Jill wanted to add anything.
That was good.
Okay, thank you. It looks like our executive director has an additional comment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to draw attention to one piece that's within the report, and that's that today we're discussing the corporate climate action plan, not the community climate action plan. So certainly when we come back with the community climate action plan, there'll be a different target set and lots of other opportunities to explore different pathways at that time. So our corporate climate action plan makes up was baselined in 2019 at 3,327 tons of GHG per year, where the community was baselined at 207,218 tons of GHG per year. And I just also wanted to comment on the idea of a stretch goal. So based on all of the information that Ms. Yardy and our fleet and facilities team has pulled together, I do feel that 30% at this time is a stretch goal, because there's significant amount of work that would need to be done to achieve that. There's also considerations to budget allocation, and we don't have that information until those studies that are referenced in the report are complete, and also capacity. So I think as we complete these studies, we'll have a greater understanding of the budget commitments that would be required. And certainly at that time, we could come back with the recommendation of a different target. But as we sit currently today, 30% does feel like a stretch target. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll get this on the floor here. So what's before us is as follows. Oh, I should just confirm, was that the only person online, Clerk Thomas? Yeah, okay, thank you. That staff report CCS 2023-01, Corporate Climate Change Action Plan and Greenhouse Gas Reduction Pathway Feasibility Study be received, and that Council adopt a greenhouse gas reduction target of 30% below 2019 levels by 2030 to satisfy Milestone 2 of the Partners for Climate Protection Program, and further that Council adopt the Greener Collingwood Corporate Climate Change Action Plan, including the visions and actions identified therein, as the Town of Collingwood's local corporate climate action plan. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Baines and Councillor Brennan. Councillor Houston, thank you. We're going to take a break soon. Okay. Would anyone on council like to raise questions? Councillor Baines, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. To Mr. Gallant, it is Gallant? Yep. Right. Thank you for that plain English, concise and explicit report that you presented. No $10 words, and I really appreciate that, quite frankly. My question is this. If in the unlikely and hopefully unfortunate event we are unsuccessful collectively to get this 50,000 grant from FCM, and I'm sure Councillor Jeffrey will do all in her powers to lobby on that behalf. We need a grant to get grants, correct? That's what you're basically saying. This grant, the 50,000, to get other grants.
We need a study. We need a study
Studies,
to
okay.
get.
So what I'm concerned about to keep this going is that if we are unsuccessful, I hope you'll come back here ASAP to replace that 50,000 so you can go ahead with your studies, because this is vital.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Sorry.
I was just going to note that it's $200,000 that the
Aye.
grant is for. And so the 50,000 is the town of Collingwood's contribution. The 200,000 is from the
Oh.
Canadian FCM.
Oh, that's an expensive, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that information. No other questions.
That was a good question. Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And if I remember correctly, the 50,000 is already in the budget. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So we're good that way. We're just hoping for the grant, and it certainly sounds like the possibility is strong that we will get that. I'm supportive of the 30%. I was looking at the Appendix C, which provides some information about the other communities, and I noticed that Ajax and Whitby are the only other two that are using 2019 levels. The other ones are all earlier than that, which my assumption would be your 2019 would be a higher level of usage, and therefore the 30% of the higher level would be a higher commitment to program-wise. And I also noticed that we're declaring for 2050, and I was wondering about that, but it appears to be that's the norm, as 10 out of the 17 are declaring for 2050 as well. So, as I said, I'm supportive of the 30%. I just wanted to state that.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hamlin. So to the staff, to Adam and Jill and Cole, great work. I can tell your enthusiasm for it. Despite risk, I prefer to use awareness targets as opposed to risks. So as long as we're aware of them and we know they're there. I'm also excited that with respect to sustainability development goals, that the climate change will impact 12 of the 17. So for our strategic plan, there will be particularly goal 13 of the SDGs, but also there'll be another 11 that we can tack on to our work there. And that'll be really important going forward for grants and information as well. And something else. And I'm not opposed to, I think staff are really motivated, and I agree with the Deputy Mayor's comments, but I'm not opposed to putting in adopt a greenhouse gas reduction target of a minimum of 30% below. I mean, I think if staff can find it, they will. And I don't think we take anything or make it any more difficult for staff by adding those words. We also show our intent that this is our minimum that we're going to try for. But I'll make that amendment when it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much. And I'll just echo comments that this is an excellent report and it's a tremendous amount of work. And I'm so very happy to see that we have increased our target reduction, because I was so disappointed when we had initially considered only 20% for our corporate GHG reduction. So this is much more in keeping with our national targets, and I think more in keeping with where this council and many members of our community need to be. I also I take to heart the suggestions that have been made by our climate action team members, but we have to balance our fiduciary responsibility along with our environmental responsibility. And I think if we aim too high and it costs too much, then we maybe stand to lose more than if we just proceed in this way. But I will also say that I will definitely second Councillor Jeffrey's amendment to indicate that this would be a minimum target of 30%. Just one more comment, and this may be actually through you to it may be through you to Adam, but it might be to Director Salama, and that is that among the buildings that are listed that we're looking at, I did not see our new water treatment plant. To me, that is a massive opportunity for us right out of the gate to be building a net zero building. And I'm just wondering why that is not included and what is the plan?
I can take that, Nicole. Is that all right? So through you, Mayor, to Councillor Doherty. It's not in there. It's not in there because they're currently designing it. But one thing we did do with the new water treatment plant is early in that design process, we were involved when they talked about what they wanted the facility to be and look like. And I would say one of the first big decisions that was made with climate lens, I would say, would be the fact not to put natural gas in there. The existing water treatment plant doesn't have electricity or doesn't have natural gas. And so when the decision came up, do we want to put natural gas in there for the new facility? We said, no, it's not going in. So that's puts us further ahead right from the start. And then Jill and I both participated in the design meetings. And then so when they chose the HVAC equipment and everything else, we kept pushing for most efficient, where can we use renewables, where can we use recovery? So the same type of recommendations that we're going to expect from this study, we were pushing for that. At the end of the day, it's budget and space. So budget and space is what that competes against. And I think the water treatment plan and Ken and team and everybody has done a great job. And they have incorporated a lot of energy efficient measures in the selection of new equipment and making the most out of the space that they have for renewable recoveries. So that's why it's not in the study. It doesn't stop us from later looking at that site if there's anything we can do, but the timing of them designing and constructing it doesn't align with this study at this time.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question. So do we know now, or will we know before we actually put shovel in the ground that we are achieving net zero with this building? Like, are we calculating it as we go, I guess?
I'm not aware of that target, Nicole, or do you want to speak to that, or did they speak to that in their report?
I might refer to Director Slama.
Is this going to be a net zero water plant?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councillor Doherty. I do not believe that we are able to achieve a net zero. I know that Manager McGinnity has been working with Nicole on a climate lens report to provide that to council, which will explain some of the ways that climate change and sustainability has been incorporated into the design. Much along the lines of what Coordinator Gallant just mentioned. Another couple of things that I wanted to mention that I've also, just to add on to what Coordinator Gallant mentioned, was the design team are going to be incorporating solar panels on the roof of the facility. So that was something that was added to contribute to reducing our GHG balance. And also an important aspect that isn't very front facing is the way that the design team has been incorporating the potential for water quality changes as a result of climate changes. So, being aware that though we have great raw water quality in Georgian Bay today, that might not always be the case. And so that potential need to incorporate different forms of treatment has been contemplated during this design to allow that space and that possibility, retaining that for the future in case it's needed.
Thank you. Well, I'll just say I so appreciate the hard work that's been done on this. And I know it was just 6 months ago that the staff report came forward saying 20%. So I do appreciate the stretch here. I also acknowledge that our corporate greenhouse gas emissions is under 2% of all of that created by our community. However, I do feel it's so important for us to lead by example. And I believe that if we can show our residents and builders and businesses how to do it, there'll be a lot more interest and excitement around what others could do as well. So thank you so much for keeping on this, and we'll look forward to hearing news of the receipt of the grant and the start of the study. So I understand there's an amendment on the floor to this, or about to be on the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I'd just like to add the words, a minimum of.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we had a seconder and Councillor Doherty. Is there any further questions or comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I'm just going to confer with our clerks. We have a few procedural issues.
Motion needs to be
the main motion. Oh, that was, thank you. Okay, so we just voted on the amendment. Now we have to vote on the main motion. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
All the studies. Yeah. And the yeah, and I didn't know. Or Kevin, because Kevin was here, right? Thing that can be looked at.
Okay, sorry for the delay there. Okay, so what we're chatting about here is, if we adjourn the meeting, Zoom links disappear, and when we can start the next one, and so on. So I'll just ask our clerk to explain this.
Certainly, and I do have a request for a quick clarification too. In the motion that we had proposed for, or our council had passed regarding the approach for phase 3 for the arts feasibility study, I just want to ensure, because it wasn't clearly stated that it was just for the St. Marie Street site. I just want to confirm that was the intent. It was a unanimous vote.
Yes,
it was St.
that's
Marie Street.
right.
Okay, perfect. And we have conferred with CAO Skinner and Mayor Hamlin. The rest of the items on the agenda today are not imperative to be moved forward, so we can defer them to a future agenda. And we did talk about potentially reconvening, but then we do lose the Zoom link, so the public participation is lost then if we did reconvene, and they would have to be here in person. So I think it's just easiest that we defer and add to a future agenda.
Yeah, so we'll be adjourning the meeting we're in. I'll be seeking a motion for that. And then the next meeting will start at 5:30, so we have time for a bio break and a quick bite before we get into the evening meeting. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn this. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. All those in favor? Thank you, and we'll see you at 5:30. Thanks.